You know those little digital purchases we make all the time? A dollar for a coffee, 99 cents for an app. We barely even think about them. But what if that same digital spare change could lead to two completely different futures? One path gets you a pile of virtual treasure, and the other, real-world wealth. Let's break down how that happens.
It's a really good question, right? And we're not just talking about a few cents here. Last year, one gamer paid $160,000 for a virtual skin for a gun in Counter-Strike. I mean, think about that. That's a down payment on a house, or the whole house in a lot of places. It seems totally wild, but it's the engine driving a massive digital economy.
And when I say massive, I really mean it. The market for what are called loot boxes in video games brings in something like $15 billion a year. That's billion with a B. So what on earth are people buying, and why is it so incredibly compelling?
Okay, the key word here is randomized. When you buy a loot box, you have no idea what's inside. You might get some super rare weapon that gives you a huge advantage, or you could get a useless duplicate of something you already have. It's basically a digital mystery box. And that uncertainty? Well, that's the secret sauce.
So to really get why this is so darn effective, we have to look past the game itself and, look right into our own brains. It turns out game developers are tapping into decades of neuroscience to make these things incredibly hard to say no to.
At its core, the whole thing is remarkably similar to something we're all familiar with, a slot machine. The entire experience is designed to feel just like it. You've got the flashing lights, the exciting sounds, the dramatic animations. It's all about making that moment of reveal, that big reveal, a huge rush.
The psychological principle behind both the slot machine and the loot box has a fancy name: variable ratio reinforcement. It sounds complex, but the idea is actually super simple. If a reward is unpredictable, we'll try to get it way more often than if we knew when it was coming. It's that maybe this time feeling that keeps us hooked.
And this is not a new discovery. Not at all. Way back in the 1930s, the famous psychologist B.F. Skinner found that lab rats would press a lever over and over and over again if a food pellet came out at random times. They couldn't predict the reward, so they just kept pressing. And, well, it turns out we're not so different.
There's a biological reason for this. That feeling of anticipation, that hope that this box will be the one with the jackpot, it triggers a release of dopamine in your brain. That's the chemical that gives you that feel-good sense of pleasure and motivation. Our brains are literally wired to chase that feeling, which, is the very heart of how addiction works. Now, with all this talk of slot machines and addiction, you're probably thinking, wait a minute, isn't this just gambling? Well, that's where things start to get really complicated from a legal standpoint.
See, in most places, for something to legally be considered gambling, it has to check 3 boxes. First, consideration. You have to pay for it. Second, chance. The outcome has to be random. And third, a prize. You have to get something of value back.
Okay, so loot boxes clearly have the first two. You pay real money and the outcome is totally random. But where the legal argument against them usually falls apart, at least for now, is on that third element, the prize. According to the law as it stands, a prize has to have actual real-world monetary value. You have to be able to cash it out, kind of like casino chips. But since the digital swords and skins you win are stuck inside the game and can't be legally sold for real money, courts have generally ruled they don't count as a prize. So legally, it's not gambling.
So we have this really powerful system of small payments, driven by some pretty compelling psychology, that's generating billions of dollars for virtual stuff. But what if we could take that same system and just flip the script?
What if we could take that same core idea of small, frequent digital payments and aim it in a totally different direction? I mean, instead of piling up pixels on a screen, what if we used it to build an actual portfolio?
This is where the other fate for your digital spare change comes in. It's a concept called micro-investing.
Micro-investing is pretty much what it sounds like. It's a way to invest, but with tiny amounts of money. So instead of needing thousands of dollars just to get in the game, some apps let you start with as little as a few bucks, buying little slivers or fractional shares of stocks and funds. And how it works is brilliant, really. You just link your bank account or a credit card, then you can turn on a roundup feature. So let's say you spend $10.35 on something. The app rounds it up to 11 and automatically invests that extra 65 cents for you. You can also set up tiny recurring deposits. The real power here is that it helps people get past that #1 excuse for not investing, the feeling that you just don't have enough money to start. And it's not like you're just buying random stocks. This spare change typically goes into a ready-made, diversified portfolio. It's usually made of something called exchange-traded funds, or ETFs. Just think of an ETF as a basket that you can buy, and inside that basket are already hundreds of different stocks and bonds. This spreads your money out instantly, which is a huge deal for managing risk, especially when you're just starting out.
By investing these small amounts regularly, whether it's your roundups or $5 a week, you're using this really powerful strategy called dollar cost averaging. All it means is that you automatically end up buying more shares when prices are low and fewer shares when prices are high. And over time, this can actually lower the average price you pay per share and just smooth out the bumps of a crazy market.
So when you take a step back and look at the big picture, you see two very different systems, but they're both built on the exact same idea of tiny little transactions.
Let's just compare them head to head. The input for both, it's the same, small bits of your real money. But the psychology is totally different. Loot boxes use that unpredictable rewards schedule to keep you coming back. Micro-investing uses a consistent, automated schedule to build a habit. And the output? This is the biggest difference of all. Virtual items versus real financial assets. And that leads to the final outcome, a collection of digital goods or the potential to build actual wealth.
And hey, this isn't just a theory. One consumer study found that people using these kinds of saving and investing apps saved, on average, an extra $600 a year, more than they would have otherwise. That's a real, tangible result from putting those tiny transactions to work.
So what this all really boils down to is that both of these systems get the same basic principle. Small bits of money, spent often, can add up to something huge. The fundamental difference is just what that something turns out to be. One path leads to a collection of pixels. The other leads to a portfolio.
Ultimately, every tiny little transaction we make is a choice. A few cents here, a dollar there, it might not feel like a big deal in the moment. But over time, all that change adds up and builds a future. The only question is, what kind of future are you building?